Today we are joined by a fantastic person. I'm going to try the name, probably mutilate it, but Anne-Maartje Oud.
Well, yeah,
Anne-Maartje Oud. Anne-Maartje Oud. And yes, I will be cutting and editing on that.
yeah.
How are you doing today, Anne?
I'm good, and I'm impressed because it's such a terrible name to pronounce if you're not from the Netherlands. So let's say you did your best, but you can always call me Anne during this conversation now because else you have this tongue twister going on.
Sold.
Yeah,
I will be.
yeah. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, Anne, your specialty is going into corporations and exploring or working with, would it be workplace conflict or just workplace communication?
I would say communication, because if you just say conflict, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's people want to be more, self-assured, or they are working in a team and they want to do better. So I would say communication, although that is very broad. We always say it's about behavior. So we
Okay.
come in businesses and talk about behavior.
Okay, and to put everybody on track, you were recommended to me by the great Joe Navarro, who is possibly the best in the world at body language. If not, he's in the top five.
I would
And
say it's the best, of course.
well, he is going to your conference, and Chris Hadnaggy, a mutual friend of ours. So definitely enjoy that. But body language, then, and that's something I cover a lot, is part of what you explore.
hmm
What I'm interested in, though, and I have found that we worry about body language and we say, okay, well, are the arms closed off? Are they doing this? Or they're scratching their nose? That's all cool, but what do we do with it?
Good question. Well, let me start with the arms crossed because every time I start a lecture, and Joe will say the same,
Sure.
it is always seen as, oh, we know this, and it means somebody is closed off, and then everybody thinks, hooray, we know something about body language. Well, let me say first, it's called a self hug,
hmm
and that already says us something. So it's not like a shield. It's not we try to comfort ourselves all the time. So
Right.
that's one thing I always want to address. And secondly, it is exactly what you say. We have to look at everything. It is not just one tiny thing or here or there or whatever. You always have to look at the whole body, but
Mm.
also, and this is why I love doing my job, is everything that is influencing the situation. So the interaction between you and me is already different than when you have an interaction with somebody else, and you might have the same body language, but when the other person is different, there's an interaction going on, and there is different body language going on. And then you also have the setting. So to make a long story short, what can we do with it is analyze it. We can use it to analyze, but then you have to adapt it to the situation. Because if the situation is going fantastically well,
Mhm.
well, then nobody's in trouble and we all love it. But usually, or you can say sometimes in business situations, there it goes a bit off or goes a bit wrong.
Sure.
And then it's fantastic if we can read the body language, but also adjust it.
Now, I've had a lot of people on. Chase Hughes is a great example of it. And what he recommends and others is to just spend a little time. You've got to find a baseline.
Yeah.
Is that what you do too? Because you can't read somebody if you don't know what they act like normally.
Yeah. But absolutely, I fully agree on that. And what I would like to add is also your own baseline. Because
Mm,
what we do a lot, when you talk about nonverbal communications, a lot of people always focus on the other person. But
sure.
what I try to do with my business is making people aware of their own body language.
Mm,
How do you do this? When do you feel comfortable? So when you are in a situation and you kind of um, realize, like, hey, I'm doing something that I normally don't do, then you can use it. Oh, maybe I'm uncomfortable. So I would definitely go for baseline, but mostly your own baseline, knowing how you are, what your behavior is, and what your preference is.
that's interesting. Now, does that get into like mirroring and trying to, shall we say, approach people in a mutually comfortable manner? I don't know if I'm wording that well, but some people are Dutch and a bit more direct. as an
Oh,
example.
really? Yeah.
Or they may be more flowery in language, or they may be more introverted. Is that something that you need to look at in yourself too, to kind of maybe calibrate? Would that be a good word?
Yeah, it could be a fantastic word. I think it's very important if you calibrate. Uh, well, as Jonah Farrow also says, but I also teach that is it's about comfort for both people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you fully mirror somebody, and you see people doing this sometimes after a course, oh, I know about mirroring, and then they try to do exactly
Sure.
what the other person does, that is not authentic. So it's not aligned with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you are able to come to this level where you mirror the behavior of the other in a way that it is also authentic for you and also comfortable for you, then you see that the comfort is going. And yeah, that's really helpful, especially in business situations. So
Now
I
this.
think we all had that awkward situation, like, oh, this is not aligned. So yeah.
Well, this starts to get into the other subjects. And I think I've spoken to you in the past about how I feel that reading body language and persuasion and even marketing are all part of a spectrum.
Hmm.
And the calibration, the mirroring, and the comfort level, is it sometimes a technique to sort of mirror and then start shifting? So it's like follow, lead.
I'm not quite sure how you see that. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
Like you start to get a rhythm. It's sort of like when people are sitting together, their breaths will start to line up over time. Even their heartbeats can align.
Hmm.
Go and try to be receptive and open to the other person and speaking in the same manner, and then
Hmm.
kind of start shifting your behavior. So you follow them to sort of
Hmm.
lock into it, and then you shift. That's like a persuasion technique. It's almost into hypnosis stuff, but
Hmm.
I didn't know if that was something that you practiced or observed.
I think there's so many different techniques that people use, and what you see is that with alignment, there are a thousand ways, and especially, for instance, if you think about Chris Voss when he talks about negotiation, those kind
Mm-hmm.
of things are really important. But if what I always try to do is take it back to who are we,
Mm-hmm.
and we are having a conversation, and if you feel comfortable and I feel comfortable, we can achieve things. And that
Oh,
makes it
sure.
maybe very simplified. But if you think about it too much and like, oh, now I'm going to adjust this, I don't think it works for people. I think when people really start to connect with their own behavior and observe others and see how they can make somebody feel comfortable without kind of acting, because that's
Sure.
a risk in these things when we talk about nonverbal communication and
Mm-hmm.
alignment and influencing others. But if it's genuine, but also with comfort for yourself and the others, I think then what you said is happening maybe naturally.
Right. No, that makes sense. And maybe some of it's being let in because of interrogation and things of that sort too.
Yeah, that's different. I think, especially when you read all the books about interviewing techniques in situations where you really want to extract something under
Mm-hmm.
high pressure, high stress, that is so much different than here you and I are having a conversation because we're trying to align here as well. With a video call, it's also different than when we would be together
Sure.
and really would focus on each other in nonverbal communication.
Well,
I
look at that
heard, sorry.
segue. That's a masterful segue that you just did because one of my questions is how do we establish communication relationships over video, which everybody in the world is doing at the moment?
Yeah. I heard the other day somebody said we're not made for 2D
Sure.
communication, and that person said we're made for 3D communication. I would like to say we're made for 4D communication. You have these
Mm,
movies where there's 4D, where you can see everything, but also there's smell and movement and everything. And with the lacking of that, it's really difficult for people these days to actually come across in the way that they want to come across, but also that the alignment is so much harder because we try, and it's nice that we have this equipment to communicate in a different way than just a phone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult. It's very difficult. So trying to use as much as you see me, you stand very still. You see me working with my hands all the time,
Sure.
which could be distracting, but I'm so used to emphasize, when you're talking, this helps
Sure.
to make a point. Yeah.
Well, it's how you naturally are comfortably communicate, which is
Yeah.
which is perfect. And I don't know if it's been written somewhere, but I have a theory that for every two people, there's three people in the conversation. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is each person has their own elements, but the two people together, that particular chemistry is reflecting out a third entity, if you will.
Okay.
Because
You,
you talk to your husband in a different way than you talk to your boss. You talk to this person in a different way than somebody else. And the way two people interact is creating another energy.
and what then is the third? This is interesting. I've never heard this before. What would you say is the third person then, or the third entity?
The third person is like a reflection. Like if you're on the outside looking at them, you see one, you see the other, but then you see the interactions between them. And that's like a third entity. I don't know how to explain them. This is stuff that I'm coming up with
Okay.
that is completely ridiculous, I'm sure.
No,
But that
no,
makes it
no.
fun.
It's no. Nothing is ridiculous, and because who knows? It might be the case. Actually, we could try to. It would be interesting if you videotape people.
Well, if you
and
see
can
people, here's a great example.
Yeah.
You work with a workplace environment.
Yeah.
Now you'll have two employees, and they'll have a lot of chemistry. And when they are together, their chemistry rises.
Mm-hmm.
And you feed off of this energy because they're just going back and forth and riffing on each other, and it's almost like a magical thing going forward. Then you get somebody else who walks in the room who's completely toxic to one or the other, and the interaction between those two people, both of them become something completely different, and then you're drawing energy off of this negative energy between the two of them. That's the third.
Okay. I never looked at it that way. I think if what I understand is when you walk into a room and you can feel this tension going on, but I kind of try to see that in the behavior of the other. So I've never looked at it as energy or something more of.
Well, you're mixing two things. If you
Okay.
think about it, it's like oil and water. They don't mix, right? But then other
Yeah.
things do.
Okay.
And you don't have that negative energy without both people together.
Okay.
And I think that's a very important factor.
Okay.
Is how do they interact with one another, and is that creating this toxic blend?
Yeah.
Instead of concentrating one or the other, maybe the combination, and then find out what is it. Can we add in and sometimes you add in a third person, and then the whole energy can shift yet again.
Well, that I fully agree on. I'm just curious why you call that energy. So why? Because
My vocabulary is weak.
No, it's not an attack. I'm just well, this might be Dutch. Sometimes when people talk about energy, it becomes more soft. Like when you say entity, I'm curious what you mean by that.
By entity, I mean it is literally without the two of them together, this overall mix does not exist.
Yeah.
And that mix is powerful enough that I almost consider that the third person.
Okay. Yeah, well,
And
I would
think
definitely.
of couples are a great example of that, actually, because you have the husband, you have the wife, or
Yeah.
spouse and spouse will be
Yeah.
as correct as possible. If you talk to one, they're one thing. You talk to the other, they're another thing. But when they're together, they are absolutely a third thing.
Yes. Well, and then I wouldn't say it's a third thing, but that's my personal belief. I would say it's still them in a different setting. And if you say that's a third thing, that might be how you would describe it. I would always say, hey, the behavior, when you meet somebody else with a different behavior, that has an effect. And that back and forth, well, you could call that entity or energy.
I call it a third identity, though, because both of them are expressing more of and subsuming some of their own individual identity to create the third interaction.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I would call it the effect that the behavior has on the interaction of them. Because
Sure.
if you have the same style person,
Hmm.
the might be that it's the same effect. But anyway, this is like semantics here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No worries. This is
make you
fun.
feel uncomfortable or something. But yeah.
I don't.
Okay, good.
I,
Okay.
I like to learn. I like to experiment and learn from experts like you.
Yeah, good. Well, it's. I think it's always a perception how people see this, and I always try to make it as maybe simple, like, oh, now they're talking to each other. What's going on? Because
Hmm.
if let me rephrase this. If you say that when people have an interaction with each other, it's never the same. So
Hmm.
even the spouses you're referring to, if it's in the morning, then they have a different interaction
Sure.
than maybe at the end of the day when they're really tired or something.
Hmm.
And that is intriguing to me, like what caused that different behavior or the conflict in a team or something. Because what people sometimes do is, oh, it's that person. And when you put those two persons together, this happens.
Hmm.
And I always try to say, okay, this is what we observe. We see this, well,
Sure.
energy or this behavior going on. Why did this happen?
Hmm.
And especially in teams when they're not really working together, sometimes people say, oh, those people, they just can't work together. You just shouldn't put them together in this team. But then I'm always intrigued, but what is it that they can't work together? And
Right.
if you can work on that behavior, which is possible, then they're still the same people, but they adapt to the situation.
Sometimes the person you have the strongest conflicts with, you can become extremely close to because the conflict may be
Yeah.
that you both feel very strongly and there's similarities there. But
Yeah.
there's also the conflict could be that the person reminds you of a bully you had in fourth grade
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
has nothing to do with anything. It's just
It's
I don't like
projection.
I don't like gingers, or
Yeah.
some crazy thing like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, they've got that particular look or whatever. You have this or their first name. I knew a Bill, and Bill was mean to me, and I just don't like Bills. See,
Yeah.
it's weird.
Yeah,
Where,
it's very weird and very dangerous. If not dangerous, maybe that's not the word, but concerning.
mhm,
Because luckily, like you are aware, and a lot of people luckily are aware, like, oops, this might be my projection, or this might
sure.
be my past talking. But sadly, in a way, you could say it's nice because then I have a lot of business. But sadly, people don't know this all the time. And when you start analyzing or working with a team, all
Mhm.
of a sudden they're like, oops, this is nothing to do with you. This has to do with my projection, or this has to do with my past. Yeah, so that's sad.
So, how would you approach that? Would you try to discover and then maybe reframe the situation as they're talking to each other?
You mean when two people are in conflict?
Yes.
Or- Um, yes and no, depends on the situation. And I'm not a mediator or something. They hire me for behavioral advice,
Hmm.
and so it depends on the situation. But usually it's just talking, and then they say all the things they want to say to this person that they haven't said in a while. And they can say that to me, and the other person gets to do the same. And the funny,
Are you
well, I
are
don't know.
you in the same room when they're doing it?
No, no, not in the beginning. No, first it's
Okay.
separate.
I was gonna
Well,
say it sounds like
no, then
marriage
there would be
counseling. Then,
different
oh
energy. There would
boy.
be a third problem then going on. No, this is, and it's so, in a way, I, when you do this, it's, I would say, fantastic and worrying at the same time because what they say, sometimes they literally say the same thing.
Mm,
And actually, they agree on something, but they've never said it to each other because there's, bad vibes, so to
do you
say.
ever ask them what would the other person say about them about this? I'm just curious because that's
Yes.
I've always found to be fascinating when you say, "What would Bill say you think of such and such?" Sometimes they're dead on.
Yeah, and that helps because if you allow them to vent, which this is what I see in businesses, the venting, just saying what needs to be said in an early stage, because if
Hmm.
you wait too long, then the conflict will
Sure.
goes up. If you allow yourself, but also other people to vent on, hey, how do you see me, or what do you think is wrong with this project, or what is my mistake? actually business, well, not business improves, but the interaction improves, and then communication and the business improves. So in these kind of situations, people are happy sometimes, and well, not that they become best friends, but as you described before, it is possible that all of a sudden they start understanding each other, like, oh, I didn't know, oh, thank you, and then they start working in a better way. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Well, it helps at least build a potential respect, if not a friendship, just a respect. Like, okay, your life experience to this point is A, and mine is B. I can understand though if I lived in A that I might, feel the same way. And that's a lot of it right there. It's just a whole,
Yeah,
oh, okay, yeah.
yeah. And what we try to do is make them describe the behavior very specific.
Do you have any examples?
About the yes. Let me start on working with teams. Oh, you start laughing. Why was that?
No, I'm smiling. We talked about having examples ahead, and I'm
Yeah,
thrilled.
yeah. That's like, do I have an example? Well, let me do a general example first.
Sure.
If there's, because else it's a very specific conflict. But
That's
when
fine.
you are working together and somebody says, "I don't like this person," that doesn't work because nobody knows why, and it could be because the name is Bill, as you said. So we try to analyze what it is. So it's a bit of like scrutinize why he doesn't like that person. And let's say it's as simple as the name, okay, then you're done. But sometimes it can be really specific things like, yeah, he comes up. I had this one day that somebody came like every morning, the person came into the room, which was an open office. So in the Netherlands, it's kind of normal to have these open offices that everybody works together. And this person came in always 5 or 10 minutes later than actually should be. And then he was all like bombastic and hi everybody, and putting his stuff down and kind of being noisy and loud. And it started with a little irritation on the other person I was talking to, up to the point where she couldn't stand him anymore. Like, oh, he's so annoying and he makes this noise all the time and he's so loud and I hate it. And I asked her, did you ever tell him? Did you ever address that he's so loud to you and noisy? And she also didn't like that he wasn't on time, all those kind of things, like behavior. Did you ever tell him? She said, no.
You should know that.
Exactly. And then this to me is so surprising all the time. Like, how possibly can somebody adapt to your comfort level if they don't know what makes you feel less comfortable? So what we did in this case is, so okay, you sit together, or I think we did it in a session with everybody at that point because there was this whole team. And then we said, just tell each other, and not in a Dutch blunt way, like you are doing it wrong, but constructive, very constructive, and describing the behavior and the effect. Because if you say, you are coming in loud, you are late, that's not effective. But if you say, I'm so distracted, I'm starting my work at 9, then I open my email, I'm working already, and then you're coming in pretty loud, you're distracting me, and then and all those kind of things, and then I cannot work. And he's like, oh, well, I thought it was fun, and then he didn't know what he was doing or what he was causing. So I don't know if that would be an example, but
Sure. And if he came in 10 minutes prior, then he'll probably be fine.
Also, yeah, that was another thing that needed to be addressed. Like, hey, why are you 10 minutes late? And there's also this was interesting as well. Like, is there an allowance in a business, in an office? Like, if you're 10 minutes late, if somebody this was funny. I shouldn't say funny. Let me rephrase that. It was interesting to find out that why he was late, and he never told anybody, is he had to drop off his children, but he never said it. So when everybody knew, they were fine with him being 10 minutes late, and he always worked 10 minutes late. Over. So it wasn't the fact that it was the 10 minutes; it was that he didn't tell others. So it's understanding each other.
I'm guessing that's a lot of your job, right? Is to just dig that one step deeper to help explain anomalies?
Yeah, that might be a nice summary of my job, I think. Yeah, I'm not always working with conflicts. Usually it's like one-on-one coaching that people just want to get something across and it doesn't work.
Hmm.
So, but then also I have to analyze why isn't it working? What are you doing or what are you not doing?
So that
And
would be
like,
for like a presentation or something. You might work with somebody how to, I don't know, put forth a proposal to their CEO, that kind of
yeah, it
thing.
could be that. It could be a proposal, could be a presentation, could be actually wanting a new project or working in a project in a team where you feel kind of intimidated and you want to stand out more, or yeah, various things. Actually, I can't say everything, of course, but I'm coaching a doctor now
Hmm.
in these, well, as we say, stressful times. And this is fantastic to help her out because she's stressed.
Hmm.
Uh, so she just wants to say, okay, how can I deal with this stress? Which is we can talk about like, okay, why do you get stressed? But also make it very behavioralized. What can I do? What's the action I can take? That's what I try to do. Always make it into an action or like do something. What can you do?
Well, that's huge too with doctors. There's been some studies, and I don't remember where I heard it. It was Gladwell or somebody like that, but they would just record the tone of a doctor's voice, and people could predict by listening to seconds of the tape which doctor was going to be sued for malpractice.
Yeah,
So the idea of working on communication with somebody like yourself for a
yeah,
doctor,
yeah,
this is more than just getting on day to day. It could mean an
yeah,
entire career
yeah.
because there are some people who the doctor could do nothing wrong and they don't feel good or whatever and they want to sue the doctor for malpractice. Then there could be another doctor who's completely in error and the
Hmm.
people will never sue them because
Yeah.
there's no way that doctor could have ever done that to them.
Yeah, it's not just with doctors. It's with, I would say, every business. You see it in banks, you see it in politics. And actually, there was one example that was really shocking to me, I must say.
Hmm.
And it also, I felt very, very grateful that I get to do this. Sometimes I work with actors, so people can, you know, um, practice what we're trying to teach them. And we simulated a conversation with a doctor and a patient. And this doctor said, "Yeah, I don't want to ask all these questions sometimes because if they don't tell me what's going on, well, then they don't tell me. If I just have to, you know,
Mm.
ask all the time, well, I'm not a, what did he say? I'm not an interviewer. So,
Hmm.
okay." So but he wanted to learn. So he wanted to learn more on asking questions. So we did this simulation, and he was trying to do this. Now, when we work with actors, it's all natural. So it's not a pre-written play or something. It's just in the here and now.
Improv,
Yes,
essentially.
you could say improv, and really reacting in the session on the behavior of the doctor in this case. And what happened was, so the doctor was asking questions and the actor was telling him what was going on, and so end of story. And then something happened. The doctor said, "I cannot believe this." And we said, "What?" He says, "I cannot believe this. Just by asking three more questions than I do normally, I have the whole story now. I
Mm.
cannot believe I didn't do this before. I was lazy." And
Hmm.
then we were all like, "Oh my God, he has seen the light," because we were so happy
But you keep a
that,
straight face and you go, oh,
no, no, no,
good.
I cannot keep a straight face. I try to, but I also think sometimes it's good to show people that I said, wow, but I said, that's fantastic. But I also said, this is confronting because what if you wouldn't have done this? And,
Mhm.
and he was shocked himself, like, wow, just three more questions. I was lazy. And then being Dutch, sometimes I say, yeah, you were lazy.
I hope he's a Dutch doctor.
He was a Dutch doctor, or
All
he's
right.
still a doctor. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Oh, I'm sorry to pick on you. I
no, it's
it's
fine. I
culturally that way. I know. I have a friend Hunter Motz who's Dutch, and he's spoken long and deep about it. And it's a fact that if you guys don't point out problems, your whole country goes underwater.
Yeah, you could say that. But I think, to be honest, it helps people as well. I also teach this in England. And there's this reluctancy sometimes to give feedback in the way that I do. But when you help people on saying that it might be helpful to do it, it might be helpful to, well, confront people sometimes in a nice way, not in your face way, but and they see the effect, then all of a sudden they pick up on it and say, oh, this is actually helpful to give somebody feedback instead of, oh, let's not say this. So even abroad, it is more and more accepted, I would say. Yeah.
Well, it depends on where you are too. I mean, you work with Americans, I imagine, time to time. In America, somebody from New York, which happens to be Dutch founded,
Yes.
would
Very
be
good.
pretty abrasive.
New Amsterdam. Yeah, they love it. Yeah, it's really
and
good.
People who are a little southern might spoon a little sugar with it.
Yeah. Yeah. But they also like it. This is the thing. Nobody likes feedback. Even in the Netherlands, it's like, no, no. You want to do well, at least most people, that you want to know that you're doing a good job and that people
Sure.
like you. And so feedback is sometimes it's difficult to do this because it feels like an attack. And then people go, as you know, in freeze mode, or they're like attacking the other person. But if you can do this the right way and you say what the effect is and that it might be helpful if they change it, then it's less of a problem because then it doesn't feel like an attack. But I think nobody likes feedback if it's, you're even doing this now. That was funny.
Don't
Yeah,
read
you don't
into
like
it.
feedback. No, sorry. I won't do
No,
that.
that's fine. It's funny because what you're saying, it's almost like you can use an additive to make it better. Like, well, you can do what you're doing now, and if you did this as well, that would be really powerful.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's kind of not attacking. It's like it's saying, oh, or if you're do what you're doing now, and maybe a little less of this and a little more of that.
Yeah, but here, this is where we go into detail. When you say, well, the high tone of your voice, people pick up on that and they say, oh my God, he means something else. And this
Well,
is
there is
also
that.
when you say like, oh, this is so great, but we already feel the but
Well,
coming
a
in.
but is awful.
Yeah.
Because the
So
but negates everything that was said prior.
yeah, exactly. And what I think is really powerful, if you can describe something and you say what the effect is on you, then there's
Mm.
still a choice for this person. I mean, I might, for instance, with my hands, I do this a lot, might be very annoying to people. So if they say, oh, Anne, when you're talking, you're doing all of that with your hands, that distracts me because then I'm looking at your hands all the time.
Mhm.
Then I can say, oh, I need to know this. I need to remember that could be distracting for people. And then I kind of have a choice. Like, do I want to stop that or maybe do it less so that it might not be distracting? Or I could say, you know what? I might not because it doesn't, I don't want to do that. So there's still this choice that somebody has if you
Mhm.
address the feedback and you address the effect it has. So yeah, I think what you said earlier, it's also you have choices. You don't have to do it, but you have to be very careful that it's not like fake feedback. This is really
Whoa,
good,
sure.
but you could also add. Yeah. Is
Well,
there any
yes.
feedback that I always like to ask, if that's okay, ask you questions. Like, is there feedback that you remember yourself that was something like, oh no, somebody gave you some feedback?
Um, I hate being put on the spot like that because I never remember anything. I've terrible memory, but I
Okay.
would say it happens all the time.
Oh,
And over time, I'm getting old enough to where I just don't care. I would rather learn.
yeah.
My image and everything used to be important to me. Now I'm at the point where it's like, correct me. I don't, good. I would much rather know what I'm doing wrong. And I told you before the interview, I love being proven wrong. I'm
Yeah, but
strange that way.
yeah. But why would you say wrong? Because this is always intriguing to me.
Or
Like, what is
incorrect.
right and what is wrong?
Because I love precision.
Okay.
I
Like
love
more
precision.
scientific.
No, just even in language, I get excited when I can find the very specific word that describes that action to the T. There's no wiggle room. Because in English, there are a lot of words that are generally true, as in an arrow's flying on a path. It's true in that direction. But because it's flying in that direction doesn't mean it hits the bullseye. So precision in language, precision in actions, I find that really, really, really interesting. But it is also uncomfortable. And we get into the 10,000 hour rule, which is Gladwell put it out, was actually Anders Ericsson, and Gladwell sort of messed it up. But it is the idea of not practicing making perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, I tweeted today well, I don't think there's such a thing as perfection.
No. But, and there is the argument that perfect is the enemy of done.
Perfect is the enemy of done. Yeah.
But you can keep improving and refining.
Yeah, I think when you say you practice and you practice, that the journey, that you can never achieve perfection, but you can become like excellent or an expert at something. And then you still have to learn. I mean, it's so.
But it's not just practicing. You have to
exactly.
make a concerted effort to practice very specifically, and it's uncomfortable. It's not joyful. And I'll use like a Tiger Woods. I don't golf, but I can recognize he doesn't just go out like a weekend warrior and just go smack, smack, smack at the balls. Yeah. Every stroke he takes, he's fully concentrating on doing it in an exact manner, and he does it over and over and over.
Yeah.
And that's essentially, believe it or not, kind of what I'm trying to do with interviews.
Okay. So how is this going so far then?
I don't know.
Is it perfect? No. Well, I think I like the quote from Muhammad Ali where he says that I hated every minute of practice. But when he's doing it, then you need to prepare for those kind of things. And I think every time you do something, you can learn from it. So as you said, it's like you like to learn. And I think that I always love it when people want to learn. I hope that I do that myself, because there's always room for improvement. And when you see these people that I coach or teach, sometimes they're in this, like the level in a business where they don't get feedback anymore, and nobody tells them anything, or nobody tells them they're wrong, as you would say, or they don't give them any feedback because they're afraid of possible consequences. So, and then, yay, I can say something about their behavior. So that's very nice. Yeah.
Well, and wrong can be a loaded term, sure. I don't mind it though, because I do think that there's wrong. I guess, again, we'll get into semantics.
Yeah, here we go again. Yeah.
There's incorrect, which is probably more appropriate, because wrong is doing something to someone, let's say, that is just malicious or terrible. That would be wrong.
Yeah. I think
Incorrect
what I always
would be
use
having
is
a perception.
incorrect or ineffective for what you want.
Sure.
Because that specific behavior that somebody says, oh, this is wrong, might be fantastic on a different situation. So if you think about science, okay, there might be like black and white ideas and proven right and wrongs. But when it comes to communication and humans, I don't know if there's a right or wrong. You could talk about ethics, as you say.
Well, communication is more of an art than a science.
Yes, I love that.
There's science there,
but it is an art.
It's kind of like the difference between cooking and baking.
Okay.
I would say that communication is more on the cooking side than baking, because baking, you have to have measurements or the cake's going to fall.
Oh, I like that.
So it's much more scientific. But with cooking, if you throw in a little too much salt, you can always add some sugar. And in your communication, I'm sure you would agree that, maybe I said that a little wrong. We're starting to go off the rails, but I can pull it back slightly, or maybe add a little bit more something else to help mitigate. Yeah. But it's all additive, because like if I put too much salt in a dish, I can't just pull it out.
Yeah,
but I
that's a
can do
nice
something to
metaphor.
counter.
Yeah, but then what I like about this metaphor is that you have to be alert.
Hmm.
And in your because if you're cooking, some people just do something, or with
Sure.
baking and cooking, they just do something. But what you're describing is somebody who's alert and aware, like, oops, I'm going off the rail here.
Hmm.
And if you have that alertness, then you're already so much further than a lot of people, I would say. And don't mean you specifically, but a lot of
Oh,
people.
damn. There
Yeah.
goes
Oh,
my
yeah.
resume.
Yeah. No.
My bullet point
I,
just
I
got
thought you
stolen.
didn't want to be put on the spot, so I'm trying to
Oh, yeah.
restrain from that. No, that's okay. No,
Uh,
what I mean is like a lot of people just do something, and then
mhm.
when it's done and somebody else evaluates, or they evaluate themselves, they're like, oh yeah, I couldn't have done anything else. It's just the way it is, or this is
Right.
just who I am. Yeah, that is not a phrase that I believe in. Yeah.
Well, okay. What do you have to watch for in yourself?
Me?
Oh, yes. And especially because you can fall into the trap of you're the expert.
Yeah.
So now you're coming with authority. I'm
Yeah.
a dummy. So I
No,
can
that's
just
not
change.
true.
I can change back and forth because I'm not an expert. So I can come up with my goofy theory from the side or anything I want, and I can shift on it. But I also know I have no real authority and no expertise, and I shouldn't be taken seriously. You, on the other hand, now you're kind of a loaded weapon. So what do you have to watch out for?
Well, first, sorry, being Dutch, probably I'm gonna say something about what you just said, because that's not true, that because you have spoken to so many people and you
Mm,
pick up on things. So that's not true. You're not a dummy. That's kind of a, like, could be an, I wouldn't say that, because that's never true. People pick up on everything, and
mm,
so having said that, I think that what I've changed in the years, I think there was this point where I wanted to help people in a way that I became a bit annoying. Like when somebody said, "Oh, I'm having trouble at work,"
mm.
and then they were saying the situation, they were explaining, "Oh, my manager is doing this and this and this," and I kind of jumped in with giving advice. Saying, "Oh, I see you doing this and that," or "I hear you describing this behavior."
That's very masculine of you, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
Masculine.
That is known as a masculine trait. The whole
Oh,
why men and women can't communicate. I'm being serious.
okay.
The whole thing of don't fix my problem, just listen.
Yeah, I still have the idea of fixing problems. So when I see things, and maybe I'm a masculine, but I think
It's
that
just
was,
a trait.
no, it's all right. It's all right. I will ignore that, because sometimes they say that, no, it's a different behavior, but it could be a man thing. Well, actually, I think that is, maybe that is my problem when it's about men and women. I'm like, oh, here we go. Uh, Here we go. That is something that is in my line of business. There are a lot of male
Sure.
coaches and writers and all these kind of things. And
Hmm.
for instance, I love Amy Cuddy because she's done so much for the business in showing that that women are also powerful, and that they can also have the traits that you might describe as masculine. But anyway, we're off track here. Well,
That's fine. And I'm going to show you a video later called It's Not About the Nail.
it's not about the nail.
It is a brilliant video that describes that a whole behavior of communication. And it is, a male female. So like I said, it's a weird juxtaposition, but essentially it's a couple and male and female, and the female has a nail coming out of her head. Right on the forehead.
Okay.
There's a nail there.
Okay.
And she's like, my head hurts so often. I can't concentrate. If I go to lay down, it just causes. And the guy's like, but you just, it's not about the nail. And then she goes on and on and everything goes, but you haven't, it's not about it. And
Okay.
it is very, very hilarious. And then she's like, putting a sweater on and sagging. He's like, but It's not about the nail.
Not about that now.
I will have to
Well,
send it to you, and it
yeah,
is.
it's I'm having trouble with picturing this. Like sometimes it's not about the nail because then you have to think, oh, why did the nail get there? And then we have to figure out why that was the case. But
Sure, sure.
yeah, okay.
See, you're too deep in
Let's.
it.
Yeah, I'm like this has to go. Now let me because you asked a question and I would like to go back to that
Please.
if that is okay. Now, the question was what I should look out for. And I
Yes.
think that sometimes I change that. But trying to help people when they didn't say,
Mm.
hey, could you help me out? That wasn't my best feature. And sometimes also being, um, I, I hope I'm a good listener, but sometimes I want to fix things, and then I like, oh, I know the answer, or yes, this is what you could do. And in the end, what I've learned, if I just calm myself down,
Hmm.
that might also be something I need to look out for. That I'm not too enthusiastic, and I should calm sometimes. Um, but then people come, they ask the question themselves, like, "Hey, what would you do, or could you help me
Mm.
out?" And I'm very honored when they do that. So they call me up, or they say managers that I've been coaching, and then 4 years later they say again, "Hey, I've got this situation now, and I need your help again." So that's fantastic. I really like that. Yeah.
Well, it's good. And do you have ways that you might nudge them to coming around? Instead of like trying to correct their situation, just be like, oh, where you genuinely listen. And yes, I'm exaggerating. So, but where you listen, but you kind of just leave breadcrumbs to where if they're paying attention, they can come back and ask you, but not to do anything. You like just maybe ask them a couple open-ended questions, like,
Yeah, but I think to be honest, I'm not really from the breadcrumbs. I'd like to be more direct in a way.
I wasn't talking about desire. I was talking about if you might have acquired that skill. So instead of being direct, you
If I
can.
could do, yeah, I could do that. That is possible, but I'm sorry. I think I misunderstand the question now.
I was wondering because you said that you felt like you had a tendency to do that, and you don't do it as much. So I
Yeah.
didn't know if maybe you had other methods to where you would do breadcrumbs or something that would show that you're open to help them, but you're not trying to force anything on them.
Yeah, I think I just listen and ask them questions, and sometimes literally say, "Do you need help with that?" Or "Is there anything I can do?" So it's kind of direct still. Yeah.
Maybe that's good though, because they'd be like, no, okay.
Yeah, it helps them. Or they say, "Well, I need to think about it." And then I say, and then it could be a breadcrumb. I say, "Well, anytime if you need help, I'm here." So, but sometimes just like what we talked about before, sometimes if people vent, that is already
Mm,
helpful. So, but sometimes you
true.
see the things that what I use a lot is the helicopter technique. And yeah, that's I'm writing on an article about that. That's so that's going to be there soon. It's about how you can use the helicopter technique in a situation as a metaphor on what you can do. So I'll say something first on a difficult situation, and then I'll try to explain the helicopter technique with you. But what you see sometimes is that people are so in a situation that they don't know what to do anymore.
Mm,
And what I try to do with my line of work is to help them get an overview, and I could be the one who does that. So I can, and the helicopter metaphor means that you can do so many things. You can fly high, you can go into detail, you can even go backwards. The
mm,
metaphors, a helicopter can do a lot of things. So that's really helpful. But sometimes when you're in the setting, if you're in the situation as a manager or in a conflict, you cannot do that anymore. And then I can be there to help you out. And that's a technique I use a lot for people
I
to.
worry about the term helicopter
Oh,
because,
great. Oh, here we go. Semantics again.
well, no, 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 no. It's a cultural thing, maybe. Have you ever
Oh,
heard of helicopter parenting?
no, I haven't.
It's a very distinctly American thing. And
Ah,
it's parents who are overprotective of their children. It's called the helicopter. Some call it a snowplow, but they hover over their children all the time and make sure nothing ever goes wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And it's seen as kind of a negative, if you will. Snowplow is a variant where the parent will just clear anything out of their child's past so the child never has to deal with anything.
I know that with a broom, like, what is it called?
Oh, snowplow. It's a machine that pushes snow down the road.
Yeah.
I'm just letting you know that because it might be a confusing term.
Yeah, thank you. Well, maybe that is my problem anyway. Like I'm hovering too much on people, but yeah, that's a good thing to know. Yeah.
This has been fantastic. Where can people find out more?
On me.
On you, what you do, your business.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and they can look at the Behaviour Company website, Twitter, so all those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay, you're the behavior with the U, right? Because you're cool that way.
That would be the British way of writing it, like Behaviour Company.
And it's .eu?
Yeah, .eu, because we're in Europe.
All right, well, fantastic. Yeah. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and talk to you soon.